Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another very cool, very fun objective secured video. In the poll, the Phalanx strategy won first with 37%. We had like 162 votes on it, which is very awesome. So thank you guys for taking the time to vote on it. I have Art of War's own Mike Muzeni here, the player profile I highlighted in the slide on the last video. He is going to be basically doing the video with us today, answering questions that I have and elaborating on the stuff that I put. I haven't really talked to him about this beforehand, so if he disagrees with anything I put, it's all going to be kind of natural and fun. So here's Mike. Mike, introduce yourself if maybe people don't know you, and we'll get right into the video.
Hey guys, for anyone that doesn't know me, like Garrett said, I'm Mike Muzeni. I'm with Art of War. I am the designated T-Sun guy. I've been playing Warhammer for many years now, and I mostly specialize in Death Guard, Custodes, and funnily enough, Thousand Suns. And yeah, Phalanx kind of is overall my basic playstyle, so I'm excited to kind of break it down with y'all.
Perfect. Yeah, and just keep in mind, everybody, I made all this stuff, right. Mike didn't like really have any input on the stuff that I put, so he might disagree, he might agree with a lot of this. So we're gonna fly right through this first slide. If you guys want a more in-depth thing from me, I did a video 2 or 3 days ago covering this stuff. So this is the same exact slide from that video. So it's gonna run through Phalanx really quick, and then Mike will kind of give his thoughts on some things maybe I missed or that he like disagrees with, agrees with, and we'll go from there. So kind of the Phalanx playstyle breaks down to like a bait and punish sort of approach to the game, in my opinion. I think some of the pros for it, it's really consistent at primary scoring. A lot of the units that you play in these lists have a lot of high damage potential. I don't feel like you get stat checked too hard when you play this stuff. From what I've seen in like major events, especially from Mike, is the games he does win is usually by a big differential. You don't really squeak out wins too often with this. It's usually pretty dominating. In my opinion, I think this style is really good going first because you're gonna like be able to put those units that you really want on objectives there first to force your opponent to have to come out and interact with them, etc., etc. Some other characteristics of playing this style is you're gonna have a decent amount of units that are durable that can have high damage on the crackback. In terms of matchups, another reason I like this sort of style is I feel like you have solid matchups across the board. Obviously, some factions specifically get beat by some other factions. Nothing's perfect, but I think when you kind of approach the game with the mentality of these sorts of lists, you'll find that a lot of games are winnable, and you're going to take advantage of your opponent making mistakes a lot, which is always very, very handy. I don't believe it's super layout dependent either. Some layouts are way better than others, obviously, but I don't think you're like, I need this layout to be successful with this, which is very good. The strategy is like generally repeatable. Like you can map out like turns 1 through 2, I think, pretty often. And then the last like thing is it really does punish when your opponent overcommits and makes mistakes. You can just really swing the game from there. And then flying through the cons, super duper quick. It's generally slower paced play style in a lot of scenarios. And then you have that one turn where you commit a lot of your stuff. Anything that can match your durability with high damage / high pressure sometimes can be issues into this, but I find that that's like few and far between. Another thing is like due to like sometimes lack of speed, like your board control can be hard to get it back. And then lastly, if your opponent doesn't make huge mistakes, sometimes that doesn't give you the opportunity to punish them like heavily. So those are sort of my thoughts on the style, Mike. Before we get into like any other thoughts.
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit on some of the good pros. It is pretty consistent at scoring primary. It will, funnily enough, when you start off the game, you're going to seem like you're a little behind on primary because you're not openly trying to push super hard into your opponent's areas. Unlike some of like the Berserker class and things like that you have highlighted in your previous video. Here, you kind of want your opponent to be forced into a situation where they need to start playing the game. And if they don't play the game perfectly or safe, you can really optimize on those small micro mistakes that they may make, positioning errors, or like you said, overcommitments. And you can hit them with a high amount of damage very quickly and burn out a lot of their resources while staying relatively safe yourself and trading up. And I think that realistically at its core, Phalanx is understanding how to do that trading game at the most optimal way and how to get every single mistake that your opponent makes to work in your favor.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean that makes a ton of sense. Like at this style, like I've watched people just like sometimes just run up and just like commit suicide into this sort of stuff sometimes, which can make winning games like really, really easy for you. All right, cool. So that was a little bit of a review of the playstyle in general and what you like about it and what you think is good about it. Now, obviously, there's no playstyle in this game that's absolutely perfect, except maybe Warhorse Eldar, but we'll talk about some other day. But so let's talk about the cons a little bit here, Mike, and what you sort of think maybe can be a weakness of this strategy and what you personally like struggle going against.
Yeah, so some of the big cons for this playstyle is just generically, this playstyle is very just hard to master due to the fact that not only do you have to more or less play perfectly on your end, you have to position yourself to be able to be in a position to take advantage of any of those opponents' mistakes that I mentioned before, which having that game knowledge and being able to foresee it throughout the course of the game and being able to stage and be ready for that possible turn 3 or 4 mistake or push that they have to do and be able to punish it requires just a lot of experience and practice against good players in order to get that skill and kind of that knowledge built. The other big problem you're going to have is if you are playing somebody that doesn't make a lot of mistakes, you're going to have to try and figure out a way to force them into unfavorable positions on their end in order for you to get those punishes off, basically forcing your hand in a lot of interactions. And if your opponent is either a very fast, aggressive army that is able to kind of take the inch you give them to try and bait it out, and they take a mile instead, it can kind of reverse cripple you. Or if it's an army like, let's say, Guard, where they have a lot of little trade pieces like Toroxes and all the little Guard infantry, sometimes they just have enough gas in the tank to where they can take that inch you gave them and not really lose much in return. So a lot of those things you have to take into consideration when you're trying to bait your opponent, because against the wrong army or the wrong player, those little baits that you do can turn into micro mistakes on your end and slowly lose you the game.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. Like understanding, like I think one of the biggest learning curves of playing this way is you have to know a lot of the other factions in the game. Like you not only have to be like a master of what you're currently playing and trying to do, but you also have to know like what your opponent is trying to do as well, and like what they can do to you. Because if you just stand on an objective and get blown off it and die, like that doesn't gate you anything. You're just cooked.
Yeah. Nope. You just die, and then you're like, well, that didn't really help.
Yeah, perfect. So awesome. Anything you want to add on this this sort of slide before we slide into the next one here, talking about some factions?
Yeah, no, I think that pretty much covers a lot of the generic overview for both pros and cons. Obviously, we can get into a lot more granular here, but I think we're going to kind of keep it in overhead.
Yeah. If anyone wants me to like go crazy deep dive with Mike, let me know. But I really want to keep these videos in that 15, 25-minute range. We're gonna get you guys general information, and then we can learn together as a community. All right, cool. So we'll move on to the next one. All right, cool. So next slide here. On the last video, a lot of you asked for like certain faction examples of certain playstyles. So I just threw this together. I'm not gonna lie, I threw it together a little bit quickly. So if I'm missing your faction, or you think you're like a Phalanx player or whatever, this does not necessarily mean that you are not this style. These are just the factions that kind of immediately jumped like to the front of my mind when I thought of like playing this sort of pattern. So let's run through them super duper quick. Death Guard, obviously more Terminator infantry heavy focus. So think like Virulent Victorum. What's the other one? Like
Flyborn Host.
Yeah, Flyborn Host. Something like that is like something that leans into this style, in my opinion. Then Votan. Maybe the new book's a teeny bit different. I haven't really played against it, but Votan, as I understand and know them, I think play this strategy very well. Infantry heavy Adeptus Custodes. I mean, as if there's like another way, right? But infantry heavy Custodes is I think a very good way to play this. Dark Angels with a heavy Deathwing Knight focus. Those guys are just bitches. They stand on objectives and never die. Basically, it feels like Ultramarines. What I mean by Ultramarines is like Gilliman Double Vindicator, Triple Ballistas, Calgar type stuff that just like stands on the expansion and scores a bunch of points and kills you from their expansion. That's like kind of how I envision that. Thousand Suns, I think this is like epitomizes like a bait and punish playstyle probably the most of anything here, frankly, because like all of your like you have your durable stuff that goes and plays the points, and then you have your really strong stuff like your Rubik Marines with the characters, Magnus, hide and come out kind of like a spear or whatever. Next we have Space Wolves. It's like a Gladius one. Like when they're playing the 10 brick of Terminators that are -1 to wound with 4 wounds apiece, that to me epitomizes what a Phalanx is. It just stands there, opponent rams into it, bounces off, and then gets punched back really hard. And this last one might be a little bit of a stretch. This certainly might not be a good one, but Salamanders with the heavy flamers, a strong Overwatch. My thought is like they're there on their expansion, they're there in good positions, and an opponent like, in order to like go play the game, they have to eat a disgusting Overwatch from heavy flamers, et cetera, et cetera. So, all right, Mike. So that's some of the factions I thought of. Is there any that you think that I missed, or any here that maybe you think don't belong here? And then like, let's talk about kind of what do you think all these factions sort of have in common that like fit this play pattern?
So I do think one note in here, and it kind of pains me to say it, is I think GSC could probably be included in here because of how their inherent playstyle is, of where they're basically hot dropping in perfect places to punish like bad positioning. They can really like utilize the Phalanx kind of playstyle of the bait and punish, especially when they're trying to bait their opponent with the lone op reductuses, trying to bring you out to interact with them, or else you're just not going to score that primary. So I think that army would be a good one to include. Come on, man. Salamanders, just because they have flamethrowers doesn't make them Rubik Marines, bro.
Yeah, I mean they're +1 to wound sometimes, right? From if you don't have any Salamander characters, you're +1 to wound. And if you have Vulcan,
they did just get a new detachment, so we'll see how that one kind of plays out.
I'm telling you, Vulcan with 10 of these dudes, bro, it bangs. I'm telling you,
no cook.
Literally, actually.
But I do think the main thing to really keep in mind is you have a very hard time playing Phalanx if you're not including armies or units, more specifically, that have a defensive pick. So one of the big problems with T-Suns is they're really bad at holding their own expansion. So having that defensive tool, and this kind of inherently applies to all factions, you want a defensive thing to stand on your home or your expansion, so that way they don't just get shut off and die. But those big defensive pieces also will require your opponent to bait out more things in order to deal with them. If someone just puts out one Vindicator to like kill a Vortex piece, there is a very real chance they don't kill a Vortex piece. So sometimes they have to put out multiple. And the more things they put out to target your thing that you've placed safely, the more things you get an opportunity to destroy.
Yeah, and then something small I actually did not really mention in this slide is all of these detachments have stratagem support, except for kind of Salamanders, unless you can armor content. But all these attachments and like units all have some form of built-in like durability, whether it's through like having 4 wounds, armor of contempt, access to stealth, feel no pain, mortal wound protection, all that kind of stuff really leans into the like, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to take a big hit from your army, and then you're going to have to commit more than you're comfortable with committing to kill this one thing, and then the rest of my stuff gets to pop out and like swing the game. It's kind of like how I envision this play style, basically.
Yeah. Nope, that kind of works. That covers a very basic overview of all the different Phalanx play styles. Obviously, every army here can be played in a different play style. These, like you said before, they're just good examples to kind of highlight how some of these armies play.
Yep, and then the last little piece is, if you guys don't know what a phalanx is, it's like a historical lesson, right? Phalanx is essentially a wall of shields where they have spears also. So if you have too many shields, phalanx sucks. And if you have too many spears, you have no phalanx, right? So building your list and your strategy, if you want to go this way, it's very important you have a healthy balance of the two, because if you can't die and can't kill them, who cares? But if you die instantly, you also can't kill them as well. So that's kind of a fun little history lesson for everybody. All right, cool. Anything you want to add, Mike, before we move into the last slide?
Nope, I think let's keep on going.
Let's knock it out. Here we are on the last slide. So on this last one, I kind of just wanted to provide some examples of the 2 different unit types that I think fill out this playstyle. So number one, you have a shield. So a shield is essentially your unit that is going to be taking the hits so that they can cause your opponent to come out, which is then going to allow your spears, which is your other half of your list and your mentality for playing. Those guys are going to come out, dish out the damage after your shields kind of take the damage. For those thematic guys out there, think of it like, the movie 300. If they run into the shield wall, and then once they all get blunted by the shield wall, they lift up the shields and all the spears come out and kill them and then close the wall back up again. I think it's a very cool little visual, especially when you think of 100 orcs crashing into some Terminators or some shit. But either way, so characteristics of a shield unit, I think, as I mentioned in the last slide, they have some form of durability built into their data sheet. And then they have a durability within their detachment, either via detachment rule or a stratagem. So I like to call that stacking durability. I think that's really, really important in a unit that you expect to take a hit. So just quick example, for example, a Vortex Beast has a Feel No Pain on top of its invulnerable save. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, can you blanket damage on a Vortex Beast as well? Or no?
You cannot.
Cannot blanket damage on a Vortex Beast. Okay, well, whatever. He has a Feel No Pain and a command point reroll on a save. But Deathwing Knights, for example, they have access to Armor of Contempt. In Wrath of the Rock, they're -1 to wound if you're stronger. And then on top of all that, if you try and get around all that durability with Mortal Wounds, they have Mortal Wound protection as well. Wardens have the 4-up Feel No Pain once per game. Armor of Contempt is pretty much on all of these things. A Redeemer has Smoke, etc., etc. And then a Spear is sort of the opposite, right? Now, obviously, they can have some form of durability here, but when I think of Spear, I think of they have damage amp built into their data sheet, and then 2, you have detachment or stratagem support to increase your damage or mobility. So just as we know, Rubric Marines, they have 4 rolls to wound if your opponent controls the objective. The characters bang, then you have other ways to do damage out of that attachment. Vulcan can point and click for full rerolls, and then you have other access for damage. I think we know where I'm going at with this. Deathstrap Terminators are just broken, right? That's kind of what I think of with the Spear. So the ideal situation, your opponent commits a bunch of their army, rams into the shields. Half your shields die because they're hitting them with a bunch of stuff, and then all of their stuff is now exposed, and then the spears all pop out from wherever they were safe and kind of shred the table. I think it's a really, really cool visual. If it's nothing else, I think it's a very cool thought for how we want to play the game thematically, at least. And I think competitively, it's an incredibly viable way to play. So what do you think, Mike? Anything you want to add about these two types of units, and which one maybe you like better?
Yeah, so I think the most important unit to have is you want your shields. Be very good, effective units that use kind of a term that I love to say is it's just going to try and scum your opponent. Perfect example of a scumming your opponent unit is going to be a Vortex Beast. Because like you said, it's a big, tough monster with a lot of wounds. It has a 4-up armor, 5-up invuln, and then a 5-up Feel No Pain. There are just times where your opponent shoots half of their army at this guy, and he just lives for no reason outside of dice just kind of went your way. Now, mind you, when you place these shields out there, the expectation is you're going to kind of just expect it to die. Same thing if you shoot out a Death Guard buggy unit or a custodian unit. Your hope is obviously it doesn't die, but you're accepting the fact that it is going to die, but it's going to have to bait out a lot of your opponent's army to do so, which then gives you that opportunity to counter push and remove a lot of those key damage dealing components of your opponent's army. Because if they just throw out a JPI unit or a jump intercessor unit to try and kill a Vortex Beast, or let's say a bloat drone if you're playing Death Guard, or even just a custodian unit, they're never going to kill that thing. So they have to put out something that's valuable to them, which allows you to really utilize your spear. Because if you're not baiting out the correct things with your shield, you're not going to properly be able to punish. That's why a lot of the times you don't really successfully bait out, depending on the army, obviously. If you throw out a Cultist unit or a Tazangor unit, or even a Poxwalker unit, it's not really going to get the response that you may necessarily want if you're really trying to push into those following turns to get rid of those high damaging and more valuable units. So I think the shield is probably the more valuable, Obviously, it's hand in hand. If you don't have enough damage, that thing just lives, and now it kills your spear, and will probably kill your shield too because it's already weakened it. And then you're just in big trouble because now you have neither.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I do really think
I agree.
shield works better.
A perfect world, again, the spear, you pop a strat on it, the thing dies, your opponent can't believe it lived, and then honestly, like theoretically in most games I see, like if your opponent bounces off one of these things and they overcommit, like I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like most games like almost end on the spot at that point. If your opponent like overcommits and like doesn't kill like a, for example, like a vortex beast, and they commit like 2 or 3 key units, and then now if you, on your turn you get to almost always wipe them, that like most cases like ends the game in a lot of high level matches, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I have a perfect example of this. Actually, from earlier this week, I was playing a game testing into the new Black Templar army with one of my training partners that I train with pretty often. Training sounds weird to say, but we do a lot of practice games. And he decided while I was playing Death Guard versus his Black Templars with the 2 annoying Rep X's that just reroll everything for more or less free, he decided to try and get a little greedy and started to split fire his tanks into multiple drones and blight haulers.
Never split fire, guys. It's a trap. Never split fire.
It is.
It's a trap.
It is a trap. It will work in some instances, but when you're trying to shoot 2 units that I would define as like a shield, because those buggies do have scum potential by being 10 wounds toughness 9 with a 5-up invuln, they could just live, and then your opponent's like, oh shit, I didn't kill either of them. And that's more or less what happened in that situation, where he split fire with 2 instances, or he split fire in 2 instances, failed to kill any drones, and now all 4 drones are still alive and effectively still at full damage output because drones don't bracket. And it more or less decided the game then and there on the spot. Yeah, obviously a little bit like of a greedy play, but that's something that you really want to push for if you're forcing your opponent to do something greedy, because more than likely it's not going to work in their favor.
Yep, hell yeah, I totally agree. Okay, very cool. That is it for this video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys don't know, not that my advertising matters, but Art of War does have a YouTube channel, and they have a war room where they teach a bunch of awesome stuff. They have masterclasses, etc., etc. So if you guys haven't heard of Art of War and you like what I do, they do it a lot better than me, frankly, and they're awesome. So definitely check them out. Like and subscribe, and I have the Discord in the description. And thank you for watching very much. See you guys later. I mean,